You're scrolling, comparing, second-guessing every choice. What if that anxious voice isn't yours at all? For 600 years, gatekeepers buried the truth, until the Nag Hammadi Gnostic texts exposed a false creator and his archon rulers shaping your reality. If you remember the true source within their grip breaks. Are you ready to see who's whispering? Ancient truth shatters all modern illusions. You're scrolling, comparing, second-guessing, and that anxious voice in your head feels like background noise you can't turn off. It tells you you're late, not good enough, messed up, unlovable. You feel it as a tightness in your chest, a small alarm that never fully shuts. At first you think it's just stress, but you begin to suspect something else. That inner voice might not be yours at all. You notice patterns repeating for weeks, even years, and something clicks. You feel that a part of your mind is on autopilot. You sense quietly and clearly that something is wrong. In the next section, we'll map the hidden architecture behind those whispers. For now, hold the discomfort and the question: who is really speaking inside you? Here's the single idea you need: many of your everyday thoughts are learned scripts, not original signals. Think of your mind like a borrowed radio. Sometimes you're listening to your own station. Other times, a broadcast you never chose overlays your signal. Think of it like this: you're in a library and a whisper brushes past your ear. For a moment you think it's your thought, but it is. Ancient Gnostic texts found at Nag Hammadi, hidden for some 600 years, show people describing similar experiences. Voices, hidden teachings, memories of a lost home. These texts don't just tell stories, they point to a lived sense of being misaligned, of carrying beliefs that came from outside the self. 2,000 years of sacred debates circle this same point: the feeling of premature separation, of living with a part missing. That feeling you get in the middle of the night. It's echoed in those old pages. You discover a pattern: inner alarm, repetitive doubt, a strange sense that your choices follow a script you didn't write. This matters to you because it changes how you respond. If you accept every anxious whisper as yours, you keep giving your power away. You begin to see how comparisons on social media become automatic shame, how a single negative comment becomes a cascade of identity damage, how "I can't" becomes the default answer to new chances. You recognize that you often act on impulses that feel like reflexes, not decisions. That's why the stake is high. If you can learn to spot borrowed thoughts, you stop feeding them. Here's what you might notice in daily life. When you start a task and a sudden voice says, "Not you," pause. When you scroll and a comparison voice says, "You're behind," notice where it came from. When you feel shame before anyone speaks, ask yourself, "Is this mine?" You feel a small freedom the moment you name it. You realize you can choose to not obey every whisper. You begin to reclaim tiny pockets of attention that change how your day unfolds. You feel the pull to know more. Next, we'll pull back the curtain and trace where these whispers might come from, how ancient myths and hidden systems shape the scripts you carry. You'll discover the mechanism behind the voice and learn the first practical steps to stop mistaking borrowed noise for your true signal. They told you the lost books were a myth until a farmer in 1945 unbroke the silence. What you're about to hear flips the origin story you've been fed. Hidden texts didn't just offer different theology. They handed seekers a map to find God inside themselves. In the last section, we sketched the world the Orthodox built. Now you discover the library they tried to erase, and why that truth was dangerous to power. The main thing to grasp is simple: the Nag Hammadi codices preserve a counter-narrative to the church that 120 years ago. Think of it like a sealed time capsule, a clay jar buried for roughly 600 years, suddenly opened and revealing a set of mirrors reflecting a different creation myth. In the Apocryphon of John and the Hypostasis of the Archons, you read a story where a lesser creator, a blind architect called the Demiurge, traps sparks of the true God in matter. The Gnostics say the real path to salvation is not through priests or rituals, but through inner knowing, gnosis, you turning inward and finding the divine light within. Think of it like this: Orthodox religion builds a ladder you must climb with an intermediary. The Gnostic teaching hands you a key, and shows you the door inside you already have. Here's the evidence you can point to: the Nag Hammadi find in Egypt supplies whole manuscripts that clearly present this inner revelation route. These texts name archons, layered realms, and a true source beyond the creator God of the visible world. Early leaders label these teachings heretical, and then Act Council's doctrinal consolidation book burnings, marginalizing teachers, all moves that centralize spiritual power. Why? Because if people learn to access the true source themselves, they no longer need the institutions that control scripture, law, and social order. Put bluntly, a religion that empowers direct experience undermines any system built on gatekeeping. This matters for you in day-to-day life. If you feel drawn to authority, to always ask someone else what to believe or what to feel, you're replaying a 600-year-old power dynamic. You begin to see patterns when you seek permission to trust your own knowing. You hand your freedom away. You feel the pull to outsource meaning to leaders, apps, or movements. You recognize the cost: less autonomy, more anxiety, more chasing external fixes. Here, what you can do: pause when a truth is presented as absolute, ask where it came from, and practice one simple inward check. 3 slow breaths. Ask, what does this feel like inside me? And notice whether the answer comes from your heart or someone else's rule book. You will start to recognize planted beliefs versus discoveries you own. With the Nag Hammadi evidence now in your hands, you realize this is not speculation, but a recovered stream of thought waiting for interpretation. Next, we map how those inner practices actually reshape your choices, not as abstractions, but as specific daily moments where you reclaim authority over your life. Stay with it, because once you know the story they buried, the small choices you make every day take on a new weight. What if the reason your attention never feels like your own is written into a story as old as Christianity itself? In the last section, we unpack the Gnostic map. Here you see its fingerprints in your daily life. You discover that the same forces those texts warn about are not only cosmic myths, they are patterns that shape how you scroll, fight, buy, and pray. By the end of this piece, you realize why doom scrolling, status chasing, manufactured outrage, and spiritual fast food aren't accidents. They're the modern symptoms of an ancient trap. The Gnostics teach one clear idea: you carry a spark of the true divine inside, and the world is built to hide it. Think of it like this: imagine a bright lamp placed under a dirty lampshade. The lamp is yours, bright, steady, but the shade scatters light into noise. In Gnostic texts found at Nag Hammadi about 600 years after they were written, figures like the demiurge and his helpers are described as creators of that shade. They don't steal the lamp, they cover it so you forget it's there. That's the main concept: a system that distracts you so your energy gets siphoned into petty battles and endless consumption. Ancient sources from the Gnostics and the Gospel of Judas show this as a deliberate design, not moralizing but a diagnosis. This isn't abstract. The story says the world's rules favor illusion over inner knowing, so you never learn to trust your inner signal. This matters for you right now. When you doom scroll, you feed the shade. Each outrage you click, each status you chase, and every quick spiritual fix you swallow is energy leaving your lamp. You feel drained, anxious, and hollow in relationships because your attention is fractured. You are physically present but mentally elsewhere. Your purpose blurs because you chase validation, not truth. Here, what you'll begin to recognize: the impulse to check your phone the second you feel a pause, the rush to one-up someone online, the spiritual teacher who offers shortcuts instead of inner work. These are the modern archon moves, but when you start to see them, you gain discernment. You reclaim attention, you set boundaries, and you act from values instead of impulses. You feel calmer, your relationships deepen, and you make choices that actually move you toward meaning rather than away from it. You begin to see the practical upside of awakening. You notice the false thought before you follow it. You stop spending emotional energy on manufactured fights. You replace binge consumption with one clear, purposeful action. That transformation is what the Gnostics called remembering, turning back toward the lamp. It's why people who practice simple inner checks report more clarity, better sleep, and less conflict. The stakes are huge. Keep ignoring the pattern, and your days stay scattered. Start noticing, and your life reorients. To move from seeing the problem to real freedom, you need a practical method grounded in those same ancient insights. A simple practice that helps you pull the lampshade off, reclaim your attention, and choose actions that match your true values. In the next section, you learn that method step by step, rooted in the Gnostic map, but simple enough to fit into your daily life. They told you the old myths were just stories. But what if those stories were a manual, hidden for 20 years and buried in libraries like Nag Hammadi until a farmer dug them up 600 years later? In the last section, you met the Gnostics' map of the trap. Now you discover the practical way out, a 3-step liberation method you can use today to remember your inner spark and reclaim sovereignty. I'll show you how to notice, neutralize, and nourish, simple moves grounded in the same wisdom the Gnostics guarded. The big idea is this: memory of the true self is a practice, not a belief. Think of it like a muscle. The Gnostics call it remembrance, you call it paying attention. You build it the same way you build strength, small steady actions repeated daily. Notice first. You observe thoughts as appearances, not commands. Think of thoughts like clouds passing in a blue sky. You don't have to chase them. Practically, when a thought pops up, say silently, "That's a thought," and let it float. Ancient texts from the Gnostics teach seeing beyond appearances. This is the same skill. Neutralize second. You cut the energetic feeding. Think of negative thoughts as small fires. Breath is the bucket of water. Use 3 slow, heart-centered breaths. Inhale 2 counts, hold 1, exhale 3. Place your hand on your chest, feel the pulse, and breathe into it. This is a somatic reset that ends the emotional charge. The thought lives on. Nourish third. You stoke the inner spark through silence, integrity, and attention hygiene. Think of your inner spark like a candle. Silence is the room where it can burn. Integrity is the steady wick. Attention hygiene is keeping wind and dust away. 10 minutes of morning silence, 1 honest choice each day, and closing the apps or feeds that steal your focus are modern rituals that do this work. This means for you something very concrete. When you start to notice, you stop mistaking planted fears for your own. When you neutralize, you stop feeding anxiety with your body. When you nourish, you begin to feel a steady presence behind the noise. In practical life, that looks like fewer reactive arguments, clearer decisions at work, and quieter nights. You'll recognize the change because the old cycles of panic or craving break faster. You'll feel more space between stimulus and response. You begin to see patterns you used to repeat without question. The stakes are simple. Ignore this, and the scripts that don't serve you keep running. Apply it daily, and you reclaim time, energy, and choices. You start to remember the truth the Gnostics named, that a divine spark lives inside you, and you stop handing your power to whatever system or thought shouts loudest. Once you use these steps, momentum builds. Small wins pile into habit. Next, we'll look at how that steady remembrance rewrites bigger stories, how collective myths are shifted when individuals stay sovereign, and what the Gnostics meant when they said remembering changes creation itself. You discover there's more than personal freedom on the line. You discover a different world becomes possible. They told you freedom is your birthright. But what if that story is part of the trap? In the last section, we peeled back a few surface mirrors. Now you discover the full map. The Gnostics left a true source above and a false creator below, the demiurge, with his archons acting like invisible jurors of your mind. Today you realize how that map becomes a working system of control, and how ancient texts from Nag Hammadi and the Gospel of Judas lay out the mechanics you live inside right now. Think of the cosmos like a radio with 1 real station and 1,000 pirate signals. The Gnostic story is simple. The true source is the original signal. The demiurge is a loud, false broadcaster who can't make new life but can copy, distort, and jam. The archons are the technicians of distortion. They mimic your inner voice whispering doubt and shame, so you stop trusting your own signal. You hear an ad's hook over and over and it becomes yours. The archons do that with feelings, looping low-frequency emotions like fear, envy, and guilt until your attention is owned. The Apocryphon of John and other Nag Hammadi writings, hidden for roughly 1600 years and echoing ideas more than 20 years old, describe these rulers as makers of illusion, not gods of truth. The Gospel of Judas even shows a savior revealing how the visible creator keeps souls tied to matter, while the true God remains beyond those copied voices. You realize the match between ancient warning and today's noise is not a coincidence. This matters to you because the trick is practical and personal. You begin to see that sudden waves of self-doubt, the relentless anger in comment, threads the emptiness after a shopping binge. These are not random, they're the archons' tools, engineered thought forms that harvest your attention. In your life, this shows up as the inner critic that sounds exactly like you, the guilt that freezes action, the cultural treadmill promising fulfillment if you only click, buy, vote, or perform. When you realize this, you recognize patterns, you feel pulled to react. Instead of reflect, you notice media and markets feeding the same low-frequency loops again and again. This is why so many good people are exhausted and empty. If you don't notice, your attention keeps fueling the system. If you do notice, you begin to withdraw energy from those loops, and that's their kryptonite. So if this framework is true, why don't you hear it in history class or the evening news? For 20 years, these ideas were hidden, attacked, and erased. Early Orthodox authorities labeled them heresy, burned texts, and silenced teachers, which is exactly what we'll trace next in the historical record. In the next section, you'll see how the contest over scripture power and memory explains why these warnings vanished from the mainstream for centuries. This means for you that you don't have to live chained to the same old patterns. You can break free. If you don't notice, the trap stays intact, and you stay exhausted. If you notice, you begin to withdraw energy from the illusion and reanimate your own signal. Today you can begin this transformation. For 20 years, the Gnostics warned that the archons feed on attention, but they also offered a way to wake up. The path isn't about fighting them, it's about revealing them and returning your focus to the source inside you. If you'd like to go even deeper, I've created a free ebook called Escaping the Illusion: A Gnostic Guide to Mastering Reality. You'll find the link in the description. The ancient wisdom teaches, hidden knowledge reveals, suppressed teachings prove. Today you can choose to remember. What if the quiet you're looking for isn't someplace you have to find, but something you stop feeding? You were told the world is noisy, and that's normal. But the Gnostics knew a different map. Texts in Nag Hammadi that sat underground for almost 20 years, showing a path away from the static. In the last section, we expose the forces that hijack attention. Now you discover the life that emerges when you stop answering their calls: a quieter mind, a stronger intuition, less reactivity, and choices guided by the true source instead of the noise. The main idea is simple: attention is like a radio tuner. Signal versus static. When you leave the tuner on low-quality stations, static swamps the music. When you retune, the music comes through clear. The Gnostics called that music gnosis, the inner knowing hidden from the distracted world. You begin to see that each false urge, every reactive thought is just static. The Apocryphon and the Gospel of Judas speak of revelation delivered to those who listen inward. This is not ancient poetry, it's a map. You realize the quieter you make your mind, the more your intuition, the subtle true signal, starts to guide you. You sense choices coming from a different place, less fear, less instant reactivity. You break free from habitual ripples, and you remember the quieter center inside you. Here, that's what this means for you right now. If you scroll when you feel emptiness, you feed the static. If you pause for 3 breaths, instead you starve it. For 20 years, ancient texts reveal the practice of listening inward. Today you can try this short protocol for 7 days. Each morning, spend 5 minutes in silence, place your hand on your heart, breathe slowly, and notice one decision you would usually make from fear. Write it down and choose a different, smaller action rooted in curiosity. During the day, when a strong emotion hits, pause and ask, is this mine or noise? You will feel less snapped into anger, you will feel your intuition nudging simple choices, and you will recognize patterns you used to call destiny. You begin to see your days shift toward clarity. You transcend reflex, and you make decisions aligned to source. This means for you that you have real power. If you don't pause, you stay trapped in fear and scattered focus. But once you begin this 7-day practice, you start changing your life from the inside out. You'll discover how your mornings spark a calmer day, how small pauses keep you from overreacting, how a single honest question can reshape your choices. Now, a challenge: run this protocol for 7 days and then share what changed. Post your results, say, "I commit," and subscribe so we can build this community of awakened attention together. You discover support, you amplify your signal, and you cement this identity shift by going public. Tomorrow, we dive deeper into the practices that protect your attention and amplify the true source. For now, commit out loud, do the 7 days, and come back with what you found. You remember who you are when you choose to listen.